You want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about sports in the state of Michigan?
You can't handle the truth!
Well, we're giving you the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast on Stables Media, the show that provides research and statistics about all the Detroit and Michigan sports teams, whether fans like it or not, and detects, exposes, and reveals actual and hidden facts and truth that the mainstream media doesn't want you to know. No junk, no entertainment, no homerism, no slappiness, no coddling, no pop culture, no conspiracy theories, no opinions, no shilling, and no fluff. Head over to our website, the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast.com. Follow us on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at Michigan_Truth, and like and share our verified Facebook page, the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast. Also listen to us on Spreaker, CastBox, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts via iTunes, and Spotify, and like Stables Media on Facebook. The Michigan Sports Truth Podcast does not represent or defame any of the teams it covers, nor does it represent or compete against any mainstream media in the state of Michigan. It is also not for entertainment or debating purposes. It only detects, exposes, and reveals honest, actual, and hidden truth, facts, and statistics about them. And it is for every sports fan's own good because the truth is out there. And welcome to another episode of the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast on Stables Media, Primetime Edition. I'm Taylor Phillips, along with Ed Smith and Frank Vashner. Darren Weiss is out. Ed Smith, how was your week and how are you doing tonight?
Well, that's a funny thing you asked that, Taylor, because if you had asked me this about, say, 24-ish hours ago, I would be telling you I would have been a absolutely fleeting nervous wreck, a ball of nerves, if you will. But fast forward to now, and after a couple good hours of sleep, feeling very, very, very well this evening.
Frank, how about you? How was your week and how are you doing?
Well, it's kind of been next week, which I'll kind of get into a little bit later on, but I mean, a lot of it has to do with football results this past weekend, which I'm really looking forward into diving into greater detail with you fellas.
All right. Follow me on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at DT2Phillips. Follow Ed Smith on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at EdSmith313. And follow Frank Vashner on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at Frank_Vashner. Follow Darren Weiss, who's out, at DW33ZYY on Twitter and at Darren Weiss8 on Instagram, the number 8. We're going to talk to some Tigers, and then we're going to get into some football, NFL, and college with the Lions and Michigan State. Just a much tenser rivalry game than we anticipated, and then we'll jump into some Red Wings and Pistons headlines before our closing statement. Before we get started, we want to remind everyone to download the all-new social sports app called Big It, which influences more and more people to love sports. Enter the referral code STABLES with a capital S. Download the Big It app and enter the referral code STABLES with the capital S. So, first off, the Tigers have hired a smart manager. Yes, AJ Hinch from the Houston Astros. Sure, he may have cheated with the Astros and got suspended a year for it, but even they finished with a ring in 2017 regardless. Great teams finish no matter what the circumstances, even if they cheated. He served his sentence, and he's still a very smart, detailed, and analytical man that is communicative to the players and focused to detail. I may sound like I go on a limb, but I give Tigers general manager Al Avila credit for this hire. Not that he deserved a multi-year extension in the first place, but he finally pushed the right button. Let's activate our What's Your Grade segment there. I give this one an A to an A+ on this one. Ed, yours probably the same, right?
It is a solid A for me, without question. This is the kind of move that we have been, whether it be you, Taylor, whether it be me, or Frank, or Jeff Moss, or any other sensible Tigers fan, have been begging the team to do now for several years, like literally 7 years ago since the moment Jim Leland retired. Hire someone who not only knows the analytics game, but knows how to play it, but isn't too overwhelmed with it, knows how to, it just knows the simple fundamentals. Knows how to put the guys in the right spots. Other sorts of variables and factors that made Hinch, gave him the resume and the reputation that he had before the fallout from the cheating scandal even broke out, so to speak. And yes, we can acknowledge the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Yes, we know Hinch cheated. Yes, we know he was in on it. But guess what? He wasn't the only one, and he wasn't the only big fish, okay? Verlander, Correa, Altuve, friggin' ownership. Come on. they all were in on it. So if you want to be mad at one, you can be at the whole lot. That's just how it goes. But that doesn't mean that, again, that should not take away his impact, his knowledge of the game and how he implements his game plan, garbage cans or no. People will still worship at the altar of Bill Belichick, yet it is well known and documented of his episodes and transgressions, if you want to call them that for the sake of this argument. But without getting off topic too much, I will say that for my grade overall, I will give this a solid A. This is the move that has been just needed to be made for a long time. And, quite frankly, they could have pulled another Gardenhire. They could have actually done what the White Sox had done and gone after Tony La Russa. But no, they actually did the smart thing for once. And this is who we foolishly thought Brad Ausmus was going to be. But the thing is, this is a guy who actually has the proven resume, has a proven background, and the proven results that he can get it done and get it done his way.
Absolutely. Frank, yours is the same grade, right?
You would be absolutely correct in saying that, Taylor, and I'll echo what Ed said. This is a move that we have wanted as Tigers fans. Bring in somebody who not only knows what the hell they're doing, but is going to do things the right way, the modern way, the analytical way, the way we all want it to be done. I mean, look, AJ Hinch paid the price for what he did in Houston. Granted, he wasn't the only one there. I mean, there's people that say that Alex Cora was the ringleader, but who did what exactly, that's another topic for another time. But he comes in with the proven track record. He can get it done. Now, obviously, like I said, I give this an A, but I really want to see if this can be brought to an A+. That's going to determine if Al Avila will actually go out and bring in some really good signings, free agent-wise, or moves via trade, or if guys like Spencer Torkelson or Dylan Dingler or the younger bats they have in their system make their move to the show this year here and can play really well.
Frank, you beat me to the punch there. I was going to mention the next thing Al Avila needs to do is bring in more talent, whether it's free agency or from the draft with the prospects such as Spencer Torkelson, like you mentioned before.
Yeah, and look, for as much crap as I have given Al Avila, and I know you guys have too, and many of us other Tigers fans, this is one time where I will fully give credit to where credit is due and say he did the right thing, brought the right guy in. Now the next move, bring in some talent.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Yeah, one's going to be more difficult to prove, though.
Oh, I agree. I agree with you, Ed. It's going to be a lot tougher to do because, again, it really depends how much Chris Ilitch is willing to let Al Avila loose in terms of spending. And, of course, they're obviously going to have to find ways to phase Miguel Cabrera out and get the younger guys to contribute, like Torkelson, Dingler, and even Willie Castro, too, in my opinion, kind of got snubbed as being a finalist for Rookie of the Year. But, again, I'll just save that for another time. So it's a start in the right direction towards getting back to relevance. So I'll just leave it at that.
Let's hope so, because at this point, if things keep going the way they are, the best thing that people are going to remember or say that the best move that Al Avila ever made as general manager was having his son.
Yeah. Alex Avila, the catcher.
Before he got ruined.
Right. No doubt about it. That was Dave Dombrowski's doing, Al Avila. I thought either that or Al Avila trading him to the Chicago Cubs. I couldn't remember which year it was, 2015, 2016, when Alex Avila got traded.
It was definitely one of those. It was definitely one of those fire sale years. That's for certain.
Yep, true.
I want to say it was 16.
No, 16. They didn't sell anything because they didn't tank.
Or would it have been 17?
So we're talking 15 and 17. Well, that's a good segue into the vault coming up.
Yeah. And that's going to come up right now. Speaking of the Tigers, from Jeff Moss of the Detroit Sports Rag on September 3rd, 2017. How the Detroit News that is, almost nuked the Verlander trade. While the drama unfolded late on Thursday evening as the clock approached midnight and the trade discussions between the Tigers and Astros ramped up over a potential Justin Verlander deal, the actual trade itself wasn't the only major story. The local print media's behavior in covering the discussions between Houston and Detroit also took stage with controversy on social media, spilling over to Major League Baseball's state-run television network. And the botched coverage of the eventual trade by the Detroit News will probably not be forgotten by either baseball fans or the Tigers organization anytime soon. Here's what the Detroit Sports Rag has been able to learn regarding Chris McCoskey's embarrassing performance Thursday night from both published reports and sources who've requested anonymity at this time. Earlier in the day, Thursday, with the waiver deadline nearing at midnight, the Tigers dealt outfielder Justin Upton to the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim in exchange for a pitching prospect. This spurred intense speculation as to whether or not JV would finish the evening as a member of Detroit's baseball organization. Some genius predicted that Verlander would be gone at 4:43 p.m. that afternoon. He said, quote, "Verlander is going to get traded today. Give me 3 to 5 odds. We'll take it down to the wire, but Chris Ilitch wants those deals off books now," unquote. The same savant who predicted the eventual Verlander trade almost to the penny on August 5th. Quote, "Give us Franklin Perez. Give them Verlander and eat $15 million of the contract. Just get this done already," unquote. Okay, now my back hurts, so let's get going on McCoskey, who tweeted on Twitter at @CMcCoskey, quote, "Tigers and Astros very close to finalizing a deal for Justin Verlander. Verlander's approval is believed to be final hurdle," unquote. At 11:15 p.m., McCoskey, known around these parts as Officer Barbrady, based on his striking similarity to the clueless cop on South Park, was first to report the Verlander to Atlantis deal was close, with JV waiving his no-trade status as a player with 10 years of experience in MLB, Major League Baseball, and 5 with the same team being the last box to check. A few minutes later, Officer Barbrady reported that the trade was not going to happen. McCoskey sent out 2 tweets reporting that Verlander had refused to waive his 10 and 5. He has since deleted those messages, but luckily you have me around because I saved them for posterity. At C. McCoskey on Twitter, quote, "I have been told that the Verlander deal is off. Apparently he didn't waive his no-trade clause. Again, the Verlander deal is nixed." The Verlander deal was nixed either because he vetoed it or because the Astros got cold feet and pulled back part of their offer. Not clear, unquote. Seriously, this lunatic deleted those tweets to avoid scrutiny. An alleged journalist did this to escape ridicule. Take a moment before moving forward and realize that a journalist tried to hide evidence of his awful reporting from the public. The Detroit News should fire him immediately for this act alone. Anyone can blow a story, as evidenced by McCoskey's 3-decade history at the paper, but attempting to bury the evidence of your actions as a member of the Fourth Estate? Absolutely sickening. Hilariously, McCoskey did keep one tweet regarding the deal being dead visible for his followers and the general public. At C. McCoskey on Twitter, quote, "The Tigers' get back for Verlander was believed to include Franklin Perez, Daz Cameron, and possibly Jake Rogers. Again, the deal is off," unquote. That tweet, while wrong regarding the trade being dead, isn't all bad for Barbrady. McCoskey purposely didn't delete this post because he had nailed the return for Verlander. They indeed did eventually acquire Franklin Perez, Daz Cameron, and Jake Rogers in return for JV. From talking to 2 sources, it is my belief that the Tigers were leaking information about the potential trade to McCoskey directly, and somehow, even though McCoskey was being hand-fed this report by Detroit's baseball executives, he still blew it. If McCoskey's misreporting wasn't bad enough, his false narrative led Lynn Henning, his co-worker at the Detroit News and a fellow psychopath, to go on a diatribe against Verlander for killing the deal to Houston. At Lynn_Henning on Twitter, quote, "Verlander is 34. Not a lot of Octobers left in his pitching life. That he's KOing this one is frankly incomprehensible. Big off-season opportunity for Verlander. Never even believed he turned that down. Never in 1 zillion years. Doubt anyone's counseling him other than himself, but this is not judgment Verlander is going to later appreciate. Justin Verlander has 30 minutes to reconsider. Needs to. Oh, Justin Verlander, turning this down won't do any of the parties any good," unquote. And guess what? Henning has since deleted all those tweets as well. Honestly, what would you people do without the DSR? Well, they don't appear on Twitter.com any longer. Maybe Henning didn't delete them. Maybe the website is just trying to protect the senile nitwit. So let's quickly recap. Chris McCoskey falsely reports that Verlander had told the Tigers he would not accept a trade to Houston, and then Lynn Henning tags into the ring and starts bombing the future Hall of Famer for not agreeing to the deal. Keep in mind for a second that Verlander would have been well within his rights to nix the trade. This behavior from Henning, questioning a guy for making a life decision that he clearly earned the right to make, was despicable. That it wasn't even based on fact makes it even more repugnant. What we learned later that evening and over the past few days from national baseball writers like Ken Rosenthal, John Heyman, and Bob Nightingale was that Verlander never said no to the Houston deal. He advised Al Avila that his top two destination choices were the Dodgers and Cubs. If neither of those two teams could offer a comparable haul to the Astros, he would then make a decision on going to Houston. After midnight Thursday on MLB Network, Nightingale of USA Today insinuated that the Tigers brass were livid at McCoskey for messing up such a major detail. Uh-oh. So, guys, let's pause right there. Man, we're going to go to Ed and Frank. Chris McCoskey was badgered by the Detroit Tigers organization for getting this all wrong. And apparently they might have gone after Lynn Henning as well. Ed, we'll start with you. Go ahead.
Yeah, even though Lynn deserves his fair share of shrapnel here, the obvious main culprit in this bungle or almost bungling this apparent deal would have been McCoskey. I mean, when you not only send out such disparaging details that seems like you're purposely trying to sabotage a deal for one reason or another, whatever the case may be, and then B, it turns out not only you're doing that, but you're lying about it. That's the kind of thing that in most other instances, that would get you at least suspended, if not outright fired from your job. So the Tigers had every right to call that out for what it was, and good on them for doing it. That's like the one few good things they gotten right or done right or accomplished well in the last back half of the decade, their era of disappointment. But I digress. McCoskey, and then, of course, old Lynn with his glorious hot takes over the years that have aged like rancid milk. You know, it's just another example of really a prime example of how shoddy sports journalism can be in this town, especially compared, if you want to hold it to a higher standard amongst the other cities, or at least how they do investigative sports journalism or just sports journalism in general, whether it be your LAs, your Bostons, your New Yorks, your Chicagos, or even your Dallases or Miamis. This type of stuff would not fly there. But yet it only, gets the comfort and support here because, to use a term, it's a bubble. A bubble-like atmosphere, it's not too hostile, it's not too mean, or any of that good stuff. So if you notice, when some good players decide to sign here or come play here, and they stay here for a long time, don't think that knowing that they're not going to be facing such a wrath of criticism from a certain type of the media if certain things don't go a certain way as compared to would be any other major market town, don't think that's not in the back of their minds either.
Right. Frank, what say you?
I mean, I think this was more of a case of journalists trying to be first to report stuff rather than be accurate. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen that in the professional sports journalism world when accuracy is more important than speed. You need to be right, not have certain details left out, and otherwise you end up reporting something completely erroneous, and then you look like an idiot, and you look like you shouldn't have a job, which how Chris McCoskey still has a job at the Detroit News as a Tigers beat reporter is beyond me, but that's another topic for another time. And also Lynn Henning for jumping in and trying to throw shade at Verlander for nixing the deal and calling him out for it. As Moss said, Verlander's earned the right to make that decision. I mean, whether or not you agree with it, it's his choice, not yours. So I'll just leave it at that.
All right. Continuing on, we have since learned that two members of the team's front office were positioned at Verlander's Birmingham condo at the corner of Maple and Woodward in an attempt to obtain Verlander's final approval on a trade that will now impact the future of the Tigers organization for years and years to come. And while that tenuous dance was occurring in real time, McCoskey and Henning were doing everything in their power to blow up the potential trade. Verlander is one of the savviest professional athletes when it comes to social media, and he must be witnessing the false McCoskey report and Henning mental breakdown from his luxurious Birmingham pad. Can you imagine if that bad information and narrative would have murdered one of the biggest trades in team history? Well, Avila and the front office obviously have had enough of McCoskey's failure to transcribe basic facts, so they leaked the news that the trade was official to McCoskey's counterpart at the Free Press, Anthony Finnick. At Anthony Finnick on Twitter, quote, "The Tigers have traded Justin Verlander to the Astros, I'm told," unquote. Now, keep in mind that Finnick had been nowhere on the Verlander trade story. Before dropping that bomb at 12:16 a.m., he hadn't tweeted for 5 hours. This was clearly retribution from the Tigers front office towards Barb Brady. You're going to fool us on a story and almost cost us a humongous trade? Okay. Watch while we give the biggest exclusive of the baseball season to your competition. Furthermore, the Tigers handpicked Fenech to tell him the actual breakdown of what occurred on Thursday evening. He posted the article this morning on the Freak website, and that story of what occurred on August 31st included this nugget. Quote, Verlander never rejected the deal, according to multiple persons with knowledge of the situation, unquote. An absolute dagger to the heart of McCoskey from the Tigers via Fenech. But Henning and McCoskey were not done embarrassing themselves. After everything I just explained to you, Henning had the chutzpah to tweet this out Friday morning. @Lynn_Henning on Twitter. Quote, Chris McCoskey's reporting last night through a back-and-forth 11 p.m. to midnight weave was great professionalism and journalism, unquote. That's BS. And McCoskey even went a step further than his partner in crime at the News. He actually attacked his readers and followers, telling them if they didn't like his faulty reporting, they should shut the F up. @C McCoskey on Twitter. Quote, Twitter, man, I gave you the blow-by-blow on the Verlander trade almost in real time, and you focus on the one tweet from when the deal was off. It was on, then off, then on. It works like that sometimes. Read the entire timeline or shut the F up, unquote. Remarkably, those last two tweets haven't been deleted by these maniacs. Yet, how the hell are they still employed at this point? Now, Anthony Fenech stepped in and did it professionally, and then my recap, the JV trade may have been the ultimate highlight for the end of the Tigers era as we take it over to Ed and then Frank first, the era of championship failure. But those two schmucks from the Detroit News had the audacity to overshow Justin Verlander and the Tigers organization by expressing their feelings that they wanted Verlander to stay before the trade actually happened without rejection. Some people in Detroit wanted to make me puke. But Anthony Fenech, he handled it professionally. He didn't tweet much. He didn't need to. He just tweeted the Verlander trade was never rejected. He was traded to the Astros. So, Ed, we'll start with you. Then we'll go to Frank. Ed, got to give Anthony Fenech props.
You had to. And even though there are things about Fenech, whether it be loads of things that have been reported and detailed by Moss and other people amongst the Detroit sports media about Fenech, regardless of what you may think of him and how he handles or does his job personally, professionally, whatever the case may be, you got to admit, though, this was the one time where he played it smart. I think he was fully aware of what his role was in this particular story, and he didn't overstep it. He didn't, try to push things too hard. He just played his role and followed the rules quite appropriately. And this was absolutely a power play or done as a retribution grudge move by the Tigers, because there's no way, of all people to get this. If there was another quality nearby, let's say, for instance, the Michigan Chronicle had someone on the caliber of Fenech's spot or position, they could have had that, but no. This was the direct competition to the Dead News in terms of getting the sports page coverages and whatnot. And to be honest, this is something that you would see down in Dallas. So if there's anything I give the Tigers credit for, it is pulling some type of muckery that, if you know that the news media, the local media wants to get their hits and their rating clicks and their views, and their subscriptions, what better way than to use their bait or ammo against each other? And that's what we saw here. So all around, very, very smart by all around parties.
Yeah, definitely. Frank, you would echo what Ed said right there, too.
Yeah, for the most part, I will. And kind of going back to what I said earlier about those who try to be the first with the story aren't always the first to be accurate. And as much flack as Anthony Fenech gets and deserves for some of the stuff he's pulled in years past, as documented by Moss, this is one time where he actually deserves praise and all the credit in the world for waiting patiently, making sure everything was accurate, and correctly reporting it and being first to get it right. So that's where you have to tip your cap to him for getting it done and doing it the right way. And I'll even say what a great move by the Tigers for saying, okay, that news, you almost blew this up. You were not right at all. So we're going to go to your competition, give them the scoop, and here's a giant middle finger for you to stare at.
Yeah, so there you go. That is our TMSTP story vault, and now we get into some college football. Let's dissect this in-state rivalry game that occurred last Saturday. Michigan State edges Michigan 27-24. Ed, I'm pretty sure you're angry about this one. Neither team turned the ball over at all. Ricky White was phenomenal at wide receiver for MSU. Spartans out-defended the Wolverines by making more timely tackles. Too many Michigan's possessions had stalled into punts, like you pointed out off the air, Ed. Joe Milton took most of the blame, quote, totally on me, unquote, he said. And then Mel Tucker outcoached Jim Harbaugh, or should I say Harbus, and Don Brown has become worse of a defensive coordinator for U of M as well. So, Ed, unleash your urinating tree anger like you did toward the Steelers and Penguins, please.
To be quite honest with you, in any other instance or circumstance, I would be unleashing a venomous hellfire hellstorm of 1,000 suns. But to be quite honest, after the emotional roller coaster I've been through the past 24 hours, I am not in that absolute giddy mode to go into that sort of vitriolic mood. But what I, however, can provide you is a succinct, detailed autopsy of what an absolute atrocious, disgusting, flat-out disrespectful amount of football that I did see was played on last Saturday. I will say that was 3.5 hours of my life I'm never going to get back. I will say that was one of the most disappointing and, quite frankly, just one of the most aggravating experiences I've ever seen watching a Michigan State game. And I've seen the Rich Rod games. I've seen the Brady Hoke games. I remember the monsoon and the rain a couple years back. I remember the botch trouble with the snap. Okay? And this damn near tops them all. Because when you take a look at the circumstances surrounding the game, this is a Michigan State team coming off of arguably, and when you say the word arguably, you got to think about how other arguablys led to that arguably, their most humiliating loss in recent program history by that embarrassing display against Rutgers. When you combine it with the fact that, hey, Michigan, their offense, I guess now looks, in terms of looking back at what Minnesota has become, basically in a mirage sort of way. Hey, they put up 49 points. They did this to Minnesota. They did that. Forgetting the fact of how they looked absolutely dreadful in the first half against Minnesota before things turned around. That same spirit, that same energy, that same type of juju, for some reason decided to carry on over to this game, and you saw a Michigan team that, frankly, at times looked scared. They did not look aggressive. They did not look like they had the poise, not the poise. They didn't have the intensity and that they didn't up for this game the way Michigan State would, and you know they would because they always do get up for this game. It is a cliche, but it's absolute truth. Michigan State gets ready for this game the way Michigan used to get ready for Ohio State. It is not a surprise, okay? When you consider this is like the northern equivalent of a Duke, Carolina, or Auburn, Alabama. The in-state bragging rights, the intensity is right there for a reason. So knowing that, you're going to be expecting their best shot at you. Forget about, they burned the tape of the Rutgers game, and they were focusing squarely on you. And for some reason or another, apparently you were not as focused on them because you kept giving up timely third down conversions. You couldn't get off the field when you wanted to. I rarely, if ever, saw the defensive pressure on the quarterback on Rocky Lombardi compared to what they did the week before against Minnesota. No turnovers, no takeaways, really? Well, the defense that's predicated on being aggressive and hitting you hard and rattling you so much that eventually it forces you to commit those mistakes. We saw none of that on display against Michigan State. Now, props to the Spartans as well, because in terms of A, being ready for the game, that was evident. B, they also were smart, and they saw that Michigan was not making any adjustments whatsoever in regards to defending, or I guess if I want to put that in quotation marks, defending Ricky White. When you know good and doggone well this man has been torching you, and that they keep going to him every single time. What's your change-up? What's your plan? What's your adjustment? Where was that? That was not seen at all. I didn't see safety help. I didn't see zone. I didn't see any type of adjustment, really. They just let them purposely take over the game with Ricky White. Now, White, to his credit, he caught the passes. He got his yards. He got the score, which eventually a touchdown that proved to be quite the difference maker when you look at the final score. And he was, without question, the biggest single impact in this game, outside of the fact, when you consider that Michigan, again, was absolutely dreadful with its play calling in crucial key moments. Very predictable when you consider the fact that MSU, they know for a fact that your primary objective is to establish the run. So guess what they're going to do? They're going to load up the box. They're going to bring down their linebackers. And when you have guys like Simmons and Harvey who could not miss a tackle, it's like as soon as they got on you, they just wrapped it up like super glue. That's going to stall your game, stall your offense, and prevent you from doing anything with your running game. So that forces you to say, yeah, we got to beat him with Joe Milton's arm. But knowing that, they should have made a better adjustment early in the game to get Milton more involved with the passes, with his passing game, instead of forcing it late. Because when they try to do it late, it just did not catch on the way they wanted to. Hence, you saw that garbage time touchdown when things were all but out of reach. Again, I know that the receiving core is not as talented or stacked as it has been in years past, but that's no excuse. You still have got, when you recognize the type of caliber of athlete that Milton is, you got to get him as involved as you possibly can, and that means being less predictable with your flow, your tempo, your play calling throughout the entirety of the game. Not when you're forced to make a comeback or you got to do this late in the game. That was not evident at all, and it was just, quite frankly, the most aggravating, infuriating. It's quite frankly the worst non-Ohio State loss I could ever remember during Jim Harbaugh's tenure here. And this is year 6 now. When you consider the fact that, for all the hype and all the bluff and all the bluster.
It's year 6.
Yeah, come on now. It's go time now. And a loss like that for anybody else for any other coach at every other position, that's potentially a loss that could have gotten them fired. So, yeah, if it's Harbaugh's seat on fire, if it's not, it damn well should be now.
Yeah, Frank, you would have to agree with this. But all that being said, you should be, as a Michigan State fan, very happy with that win. Go ahead.
As much as I would love to cackle like urinating tree, I'm not going to, because I only got to watch bits and pieces of this game because I had other commitments. But here's what I am going to say. Mel Tucker has basically been able to coach Michigan State football in person with practices for about 4.5, 5 weeks, somewhere around there, because of COVID. Program had to be shut down because of COVID and other things as well. And they've only got maybe 25 to 30% of their offensive playbook installed. The offense that I saw Michigan State run, they're running a lot of max protect and a lot of simple, basic offensive plays that I have seen youth football and middle school football and some high school football programs do. And there's nothing sophisticated about it at all. It's basically like playing backyard football with your friends, or even flag football, which I was even reffing for some time on Saturday. It was basically Rocky Lombardi telling Ricky White, like they were playing in the backyard, said, "Hey, Ricky, just run out to the tree, make a cut, I'll get you the ball." That's all it was. And like Ed said, did Michigan bother to adjust at all? No, they did not. And even when they went max protect, kept a running back or a tight end in, 7 guys protecting Lombardi, they didn't bother to drop extra guys into coverage to cover, 3 guys who were out for a pass? That's a huge indictment on the coaching staff, especially Harbaugh and Don Brown. And it's further evidence that Don Brown, for as ballyhooed as he was when he came to Michigan in 2016 as being Dr. Blitz, and he is going to blitz everybody, he can only put up those types of performances against subpar competition. But when it comes down to where the rubber meets the road, and it's a big-time game, what does he do? Oh, looks pretty average to me, doesn't he? Am I right, Ed?
Yeah, I mean, come on. The track record has proven itself to be consistent enough where you see the pattern, you know where this eventually leads, and what's there to dispute? What's there to deny? You can't disagree with it. As much as I would love to, I just can't.
Right.
Yeah, and another thing, too. When Harbaugh was brought to Michigan, I remember how everybody said, oh, they're going to win championships. Plural. This guy still hasn't won a national championship, hasn't been to the playoff, hasn't even been to Indianapolis to play for a Big Ten championship, and can't even finish higher than 3rd in his own division, for crying out loud. And it's year 6 And I hear people say, oh, well, he needed to build a program. 6 years and no sign of being able to win the division unless for some weird reason Ohio State comes down with a huge COVID outbreak and they can't play you and you end up winning by default. But that likely won't happen. And also, I'll make mention of this too. You have to think that Ryan Day, Ohio State's coach, was watching the film of your defensive backs and the shoddy job of coverage they had been doing on Michigan State's receivers, especially a freshman and Ricky White. And you have to think that guys like Chris Olave and other Ohio State wide receivers, they're going to be in for a field day. And I won't even go as far to mention as what could happen in that game, even though Ryan Day said that he would probably hang 100. That might be more of a reality. And Ed, I sincerely apologize if I am giving you PTSD at all, but it's something that needs to be said. Jim Harbaugh has been an abject failure at Michigan.
And you mentioned Ryan Day's watching the film of Michigan's defense. That's like an easy Predator studying appraised moves, for crying out loud.
Yes, it's essentially enticing. It's circling and studying its future prey, how it's moving, how it moves, and it's also detailing its weaknesses and how eventually they're going to lull them in and then catch them where they least expect it. And it's funny, Frank, that you mentioned PTSD because, quite frankly, last night I thought I was going to experience a whole friggin' bout of PTSD, so I just had no choice but to chuckle at that. But yes, it is just going to be absolute. It's a good thing this is it post-Thanksgiving or pre-Thanksgiving? Either way, it's going to be quite fitting around the holiday weekend, so to speak, because they're going to carve up that defense once again, and quite frankly, it's going to be something. I won't be surprised if we see something similar to what Houston did to SMU. It's what I'm expecting at this point. If you can get 50 and 60 hung up on you, it don't matter if it's in Columbus or if it's in your own damn crib. If they can do that to you on a year-end basis, what's to stop them from doing 70, 80, 90?
Right.
But also, guys, here's something else worth mentioning, too. Jim Harbaugh is currently in the final 2 years of his deal. His current deal expires after the 2021 season, and he is the only, I believe, Power 5 coach.
So in other words, 1 year after this.
Yes.
One more year after this.
After this, his current deal will expire, and there has been no talk of him being anywhere close to an extension. Now, I get that it may be because of COVID, but when you really look at it, you're paying this guy $8-9 million, and I'll even echo something that I remember hearing Jeff Moss say on this very podcast. He's getting paid Nick Saban money and getting Kirk Ferentz results. So when's a good time to even consider extending him? Definitely not after losing to your rival again.
Right.
I'm starting to think that this may be a case where there's going to be a separation. I don't know if it's going to be an amicable one or if it's going to be somewhat nasty, but I do not see this playing out for very long, and I could see a scenario where Harbaugh decides to go back to the National Football League.
Right.
It is just quite disappointing to say the least, knowing, by the way, from personal experience of how hyped I was from the moment that Moss and Greg Henson was breaking down exclusives, essentially saying this deal was going to be done before it was even whispered at as a possibility, when people were so heavily saying Harbaugh's going to stay in the NFL and and not go back to Michigan. I have been so hyped from that single moment that even with the past couple of seasons where we got close but no cigar, you saw the improvements, you saw where the program used to be and where it was going. But now you're at this point where, 9-10 wins. It's nice. It's nice to not be at the basement, but come on. What do you stand for here? What you base yourself on? Your brand, your history, your lore, your slogan. And knowing the fact that this player was a key, integral part of your success in past years when he was a player, the expectation was, and rightfully so, was the stars. It was championships, both Big Ten and national. It was playoff appearances. It was, at least for the very least, having a competitive game, if not, oh my God, winning a game against Ohio State. What a concept. So the fact that he can't even get those objectives done is so mind-numbingly frustrating. I can't defend it anymore. And I'm a Harbaugh defender through and through. I am more than willing to give the guy a chance because obviously compared to what we went through post-Lloyd retirement with the Rich Rod era, the Brady Hoke era, it was the best hire we have done in a long time, probably the best hire since Bo. But it has not delivered. And it's been quite underwhelmingly flat. And I don't know what's been a bigger disappointment. The Detroit Tigers of 2006 to 2014 or the Michigan Wolverines under Jim Harbaugh's head coach. It's really a coin flip at this point.
I know, more like a tie. Speaking of the Michigan Wolverines, this Saturday at noon on FS1, they visit the Indiana Hoosiers in Bloomington. Let's preview that. Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll go over to Frank. Ed, what's your preview and prediction?
Preview and prediction is I would expect this one to be a much competitive game than what is being talked about. Indiana has, for some reason, one way or another, always given Michigan a headache, whether it be their system, how they play the defense, how they just don't make that many mistakes against Michigan whatsoever, whether it be at home or on the road. And knowing that the type of mental state that Michigan could be in, I'd be very wary watching this game. So I don't know how it's going to play out. Now, I could be proven wrong. I hope I am proven wrong, but I think Michigan, while I picked them to win, I think it's going to be a very, very close game. Very frustrating to watch, and it may come down to them having to make a defensive stop at the end where they may get bailed out by some type of missed kick or a strip sack or something to that effect. So I'm going Michigan 31. No, scratch that. I don't trust this offense anymore. Let's go Michigan 24, Indiana 21.
Close one. Frank, how about you? It's your turn.
Well, I'll say this to Ed. I'm really wanting to know if Michigan can get up off the mat after that loss to Michigan State.
Well, basically, they got to do what MSU did for themselves after Rutgers did them.
Yeah, but guys that Michigan's going to have problems with, Michael Penix Jr., Indiana's quarterback. Some may say that he's the best QB in the Big Ten, not named Justin Fields. That's debatable. They also have, who I believe is the most underrated wide receiver in the whole country, in Whop Phillier. Now, Penix and Phillier did not play in last year's meeting in Bloomington. They are both healthy, and plus you also have Stevie Scott to worry about as well, the running back for the Hoosiers. And I'm curious to see how is Michigan going to be able to slow those guys down. Now, keep in mind, Michigan has not lost to Indiana since 1987, I remember correctly. But for whatever reason, Indiana's always lately seems to be in these games with a chance to win, and something happens where they just don't get it done. So, I mean, I might be walking into a trap thinking Indiana's got a legit chance to win this one, but I am going to go with Michigan 27, Indiana 24, as Quinn Nordine hits a field goal as time expires to win it.
Yeah, Quinn Nordine, he was solid kicking field goals at home against Michigan State, unlike Jake Mooney at Minnesota. I'm going to go with Michigan 23, Indiana 20. I'm going to go below you guys' predictions here. So, Michigan State, Spartans take on the Iowa Hawkeyes on the road Saturday at noon on ESPN. Same kickoff time, yet on a different channel. Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll go over to Frank. Ed, how about the Spartans?
I think it's going to be a tougher game, real tough game for Michigan State. Granted, it is another road game, but as opposed to traveling within the same state, it is going to a different area of the country. And knowing how wild and crazy things can get at Kinnick, fans or no fans, it's one that I don't trust. I'm not feeling quite, even if I was a Michigan State fan, I wouldn't feel so quite confident of winning this game, knowing how things can be against Iowa under any circumstance, whether it be at home or on the road. It is a coin flip game tossed to me, but I think if MSU does the right things and recognize what worked last week may not exactly work all the way this week, but use it to your best advantage and then adjust once they start adjusting to you, because you have to expect that coming. I think MSU may has a decent shot in anything. So really, this game could go either way. I'm going to say Michigan State does hold off Iowa. Let's go by, say, 35-31 score.
All right. Frank, how about you?
Well, I have seen how I was favored by a touchdown this one, and I quite frankly do not get that because for a couple of reasons. One one of Iowa's top receivers, Amir Smith-Marset, has been suspended for this game. So with him not being out there, that's going to hurt them. The other, and I don't know how close you guys have been following this, but Iowa is a team that has been in shambles since the summer. There's been a divided, that locker room has been divided. There's been a lot of racial issues going on. There's people saying that Kirk Ferentz is an ardent racist as a head coach. I'm not going to say he is because I don't have a smoking gun of him calling anybody the N-word.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Let the actual reports touch.
Yeah, I'm gonna let actual reports come out before I say what he is or isn't. But there have been players who have left the team that, like I said, divided locker room, kind of like how Michigan State's locker room was divided in 2016. Coincidence or not? So I think Michigan State is going to be in a much better place mentally, and also keep in mind, Iowa has lost to a Purdue team that doesn't have Rondell Moore. They blew a 17-point lead against Northwestern last week, so I'm starting to think that Iowa may be rivaling Minnesota for worst team in the Big Ten now, but we'll see what happens. So I think Michigan State will win this one. I'll say I can see a 28-24 game.
Right, 28-24 Michigan State, yeah. I'm going to go with the Spartans 31 and Iowa 27. So, yeah, the way Mel Tucker coached his Spartans in Ann Arbor and the issues that Frank touched on for Iowa, wow. I see Michigan State beating Iowa on the road. Yeah. So, let's transition to pro football. The Lions, yeah, they're the Lions, all right. 41-21 loss to the Indianapolis Colts. I got a rant on my own. The running game was beyond awful. 29 rushing yards collected. DeAndre Swift, 1 rushing yard on 6 carries. Just 1. Adrian Peterson, 5 carries for 7 rushing yards. Oh, my God. In the NFL? Are you kidding me? Wow. Stafford threw 24 of 42 for 336 yards because of it, but he allowed 5 sacks, not because the offensive line couldn't help him. That's atrocious. But Matt Stafford can't scramble out of his own pocket. He almost never does, and he threw a pick 6, and his rating was 96.9. Matt Patricia only used Swift, Hawkinson, and Galladay as offensive weapons in the first half, and he didn't use other guys such as Jesse James, Kerryon Johnson, Marvin Jones Jr., Marvin Hull Sr., or even Danny Amendola at all in that first half. As a coach, you need to switch up your players on offense 60 minutes of the game. He even only used Jesse James only one time to get the Lions to within 1 score on that drive where Stafford fed Kerryon Johnson. He used Hall a few times and Jones only a couple times, but he mostly stuck with his own guns, such as Swift and Hawkinson, when Galladay left the game in the third quarter with a hip injury, no practice on the injury report, which could land him on the IR week to week. Galladay couldn't even catch a ball, though, all that being said.
Yeah, you have to wonder how much of that was before or after the hip injury and how much of that had an effect on his game overall.
True. And the defensive front couldn't sack Phillip Rivers, who easily picked apart their pathetic secondary defense. The defensive front also gave up 119 rushing yards, complete trash as always. And Matt Prater's only field goal attempt was way wide left. He's washed up and needs to retire soon. The Lions cannot win at home because of Matt Patricia and his own ineptitude. They also need to tank for the rest of the season just to get him fired. Forget draft picks. Just get that fat ass out of town, please. Yeah. So
if only it were that simple.
Yep. So Ed, before we get to the injury report, Matthew Stafford and Jared Davis, and the preview of the Minnesota Vikings, we're going to go over to you, and then we're going over to Frank. Ed, what say you on that?
Yeah. In terms of preview, first of all, in recapping the Indianapolis game, it was quite astonishing to see how they can pick a set of quarters of when to look exactly like competent, like a competent football team, and then when to exactly like the complete opposite. How in the world do you give up 20-plus points in 2 separate quarters? Most of them, what's the word I'm looking for? Consecutive unresponding points, whatever it is.
Unanswered?
Unanswered, thank you. My mind has been frizzled out this past 24 hours. So, yeah,
that's okay.
Getting up 20-plus unanswered points in different quarters in the same game. Meanwhile, you can only put together a touchdown a quarter, essentially, with not advancing the ball enough And with the running game, now granted, there are going to be games where the rushing attack is not going to be where you want it to be, but that doesn't mean you can't use other elements like screen passes or getting Swift involved more than what you attempted to do. Yeah, just, I don't know. And I don't know what Stafford's deal was throughout the majority of the game, or at least late in the game. I don't know if there was other effects that was affecting him, as we'll soon allude to, but that whole game itself was just frustrating. And when you consider the fact that this is a Indianapolis Colts team who I said coming into this game, I felt that Detroit had the advantage at quarterback, because I did not believe or feel at all that Phillip Rivers was quality or competent or even adequate at this point of his career, and yet he's coming out here looking like he shaved off about 3 or 4 years off his life. So that was an indictment on the defense, not getting pressure, not getting stops, as evident by the fact that, once again, time of possession, big crucial blow, and how they were able to not only maintain possession, but drain out and tire the defense, moving the ball down the field and eventually getting the score. And when you have scores like that, it's going to constantly put your offense in a hole, because the offense does not have that much time to work with on a consistent basis. Now, granted, Stafford can do the last-minute no-huddle drives, but that only works in an end-of-game, half scenario where you're tied or going for the lead, wherever the case may be, or trailing. That doesn't work always in that effect under other sorts of circumstances. So when you factor that in, and knowing that it was just a poor effort all around, disappointing? Yeah. See, this one's very disappointing, but not surprising. It's the Lions. What do you expect?
Right. Frank, I mean,
Ed, you basically
really
took the words right out of my mouth. Disappointing, but not surprising. Especially their abysmal running game, as evidenced on Sunday, as Taylor mentioned. DeAndre Swift, only 1 yard. It's inexcusable. That's really all I can say. And hopefully this will be a sign that they lose out, Quinn Trisha gets fired, and then they can get a decent draft pick, whoever that may be. I have a few players in mind, but I won't go into that right now.
No, absolutely not. Quarterback Matthew Stafford and linebacker Jarrett Davis are placed on the COVID-19 reserve list. Stafford was in a high-risk, close contact with a non-teammate, but could still play against the Vikings. So let's get to that game. Sunday at 1 on Fox. Not exactly a tank bowl on paper due to each team's records, but the Lions can still pull off this loss when they play like that against the Indianapolis Colts, even when they're on the road. I know they can't win at home. It's a road game, but I think the Vikings have the chance on this one. But I'll go over to Ed first and then Frank, and then I'll make my prediction. Ed, you go first. Go ahead.
It's going to be interesting to see how the defenses perform, knowing the fact that this is Everson Griffin's debut as a Lion. It's going to be against his former team. Not to mention it's going to be Adrian. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this may be Adrian Peterson's first game. Well, no, I'm pretty sure he played. Well, I don't know if this is his first game against the Vikings, knowing he started his complete majority of his career there. But it is quite odd to see AD or AP, whatever you want to call him. It's quite odd to see him playing in Minnesota, but not in the purple. So that's going to be another narrative to look at. Maybe he'll feel motivated to want to get something done. Maybe that'll cause the running game to actually look decent and competent this week. Who knows? I know one thing. You're not going to have your quarterback because Matthew Stafford has been placed on the COVID list again. Now, in all seriousness of talk, I do hope Stafford, regardless if he has the virus or not, or he was in close contact with someone, I hope he is safe and as healthy as possible in regards to him and his family. And that should take precedent over as to whether or not how fast he can get back on the team. But that being said, it is a crutch. I've said it over and over again, but it's going to be true again. This team goes as far as Matthew Stafford takes them. And if he is sat down or has to go down for an extended period of time, that means that your chances of winning that game for that week or that week moving forward substantially went down. And it's the case right here. I know for a fact that Minnesota is just not that good this year, But knowing how this Lions team plays without Matthew Stafford, it's just on nature makes me want to pick Minnesota. And I think I will. I'm going to say Minnesota wins this one by a score of 27-16.
Good prediction. Frank, what say you?
Well, it's pretty simple for me. No Stafford, no chance. And even though the Minnesota Vikings have been abysmal this year here and Kirk Cousins has looked like crap, I will say the one bright spot they do have is rookie wide receiver Justin Jefferson, who has looked phenomenal. And I think he is going to eat the Lions secondary for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a snack.
And a dessert.
Oh, yeah, that too. So I'm going to say the Vikings win this one 28-14.
I love tempting myself. I'm going to go Vikings 31 and the Lions 10.
I wonder, you have to wonder if that's going to expedite Patricia getting out of here.
Darn right. It might take even more to tank to get him out of here, but hey, so be it. So, the Red Wings have re-signed forward Anthony Mantha as we go to the headlines real quickly to a 4-year, $22.8 million deal, $5.7 million annual average value. He had 38 points, 16 goals, and 22 assists in 43 games, including a 4-goal game in the last home opener against the Dallas Stars. And then in Pistons news, the New York Knicks are interested in Pistons center Christian Wood. So NBA free agency about to get underway, guys. So, yep, let's go ahead and go to our closing statement. Ed, we'll go to you first. Ed, what say you? Closing statement.
Oh, my closing statement, I will have to say, is quite parallel to what I've been experiencing this past week, this past weekend. If you want to say this whole year, fine. If you want to say this past 4 years, even better. But it speaks once again to the idea and the issue and the word of resiliency. Knowing that, yes, there are times where you will get hit, you will get knocked down, you will go through stress, you will go through aggravation, you will go through things that you don't like to see. And quite frankly, I measure that as well to watching these Detroit sports teams, which, by the way, I hope the Lions tank at this point. But back to the point of my closing statement, the resiliency is still there. It's always been there. And you always got to pick yourself back up from the dead to keep on fighting and showing the faith, keeping the faith and spreading the faith. We have seen that being tested this week. I thought I saw it being tested from my end, seeing Michigan perform the way they performed, seeing the Lions perform the way they performed. But between these two teams, and for my psyche and for what we all and can do and should be as a country, the theme for today and for this week, and frankly for the rest of this year, resiliency. Get back up, dust yourself off, keep fighting, keep the faith.
Definitely. Frank, your closing statement.
My closing statement goes back to news that I received late Friday night as I was coming home from a football game. And it kind of goes along to what I've said a lot this year on closing statements. I received news that Jerry Hoffman, a fellow football official whom I'd worked with, not just in football but baseball as well, suffered a heart attack during a game that he was working out in Sand Creek, and he eventually passed away. He was 78 years old. But the thing I take comfort in is he went out doing what he loved the most, putting use to the talents that God blessed him with. While I will miss Jerry and working with him and getting to see him at games, it just goes back to what I said. Cherish those around you. You never know when you might see or talk to someone for the last time ever. I never knew when the last time I was going to be working with Jerry. I was supposed to work a baseball doubleheader with him this coming spring. A varsity doubleheader, I might add. So, always cherish those moments you spend with those you love. Times you get to talk to them. You never know when you may not see them again for a long time until we all get to the same place one day.
Yep.
And it always makes me extra grateful to be able to talk to you guys on a weekly basis. And the support you have for me and the support that I have for you guys. We're a very close-knit group, and I just can't thank you guys enough for being there.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry for your loss, Frank. So my closing statement, glad the Tigers finally found a smart manager in AJ Hinch. Cheating in the past does not explain otherwise. He's still a smart manager. He can lead the Tigers to a championship. The only thing Alavila needs to do, like I said earlier, is add talent, whether it's prospects or free agents. Doesn't even matter. Bring the right talent that's capable of hitting, fielding, and pitching. That's all. because you see the Tigers release C.J. Crone, Austin Romine, Jonathan Scope, Jordan Zimmerman, and Ivan Nova. And others have cleared waivers. Some of them, at least a couple of them, have elected free agency, while others were outrighted to Toledo. So there you go. As far as the Lions, they're still the Lions. Tank to get Patricia fired. College football, who knows? Red Wings and Pistons. Hey, Red Wings, Anthony Mantha earned that contract. Pistons, who knows what they're going to do. We'll keep an eye on them, too. So, before we go, we want to remind everyone to download the all-new social sports app called Viget, which includes more and more people to love sports. Enter the referral code STABLES with a capital S and with a B in the middle. B as in Bumblebee. Download the Viget app and enter the referral code STABLES with a capital S, as in Stables Media. Gentlemen, excellent job as always. That concludes another fine episode of the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast Primetime Edition on Stables Media. We'll be back next week for Ed Smith and Frank Vazner. And on behalf of Darren Weiss, this is Taylor Phillips signing off. Thanks so much for listening, downloading, and sharing. And remember, the truth is out there. GTFN, ta-ta for now. Bon appetit. Hit them with a hind. We rest our case. Stay safe.
The Michigan Sports Truth Podcast does not represent or defame any of the teams it covers, nor does it represent or compete against any mainstream media in the state of Michigan. It is also not for entertainment or debating purposes. It only detects, exposes, and reveals honest, actual, and hidden truth, facts, and statistics about them. And it is for every sports fan's own good because the truth is out there.